Hello, this is Valerie Moore from the Frederian Gazette. Thank you for joining us this warm Wednesday evening as we reenact the controversial book Say I Slew Them Not, written by Kingsley Montivelo, edited by Alexander Phillips, and narrated by Pepper Holloway. If you've enjoyed our program so far and want to support independent journalism, please donate to our Ko-Fi at www.kofi.com/thefrederiangazette. This program has been sponsored by the Mobile Brain. We've all been there. Your boss asks you to perform complicated mathematics in your head, and not wanting to look incompetent, you blurt the first number that pops in your head. Now, your boss uses that number, and 6 months later, the company has gone under, and you're out on the street without a job and fearful of mathematics. Well, fear no more! Buy the Mobile Brain now, and never again will you be stumped by a complicated bit of arithmetic. We now pass the mic to Pepper Holloway, who will be reading Episode 7, Prosecution Introduces List of War Crimes Committed by the Montivelo Administration During the Second Shadow War. July 11th, 1826, McGill's Tavern, Bearcasta, Heva. Devin, Siegfried, and I were trapped in Katerina's house for 3 days. For their part, my father and Katerina went from mistrusting Devin to unofficially adopting him within a single day, proving he had a strong network of friends and partners who would do anything for him for a good reason. I can't recall the number of times I walked down the stairs within that 3-day period to find Devin helping Katerina prepare dinner while sharing stories.
So there I am, holding this.
Did I tell you the time at Kingsley?
Or fiddling with some part of the house under my father's guidance, breaking it,
Well, it's not supposed to do that.
and forcing Katerina to call a handyman over while the two offenders hid until her rage dissipated. Siegfried, on the other hand, kept his distance, and neither my father nor Katerina complained. My father tried talking to him once, but there wasn't much to say. Yet my father covered for Siegfried when Heron stopped by, ready to behead my cousin for being, quote, irresponsible and reckless. So maybe the two were able to find common ground. I enjoyed having the pair around, and was sad to see my cousin leave on the 3rd day to gather the others at McGill's. It's funny, but I haven't thought about my family in a long time. I was happy then. Devin and I were the first to arrive at McGill's Tavern, hardly an encouraging sign for our anxiety-ridden nerves. Amy took our orders, and Devin, desperate for the distraction, claimed she was his one and only and that he wouldn't mind being crushed by her like a walnut. She almost refused him a beer, believing he was already drunk off his ass, and gave me one on the house for, quote, putting up with the fool. Devin sighed and watched her backside as she walked away. That night she wore a dress modified by Asia, with a layered skirt and tight collar, slits for her shoulder blades, and sleeves that clung to her arms. Devin tried to tell her the many reasons he loved her, but she simply piffed at him. I don't think Devin truly believed in love back then. Sex and relationships were just different kinds of drugs he abused to silence his own fears and anxieties about the ILA. He cared for his many partners, but he cared because he was a good icatel, not because he saw any romantic or sexual future with any of them. Many caught on quickly and left him, while others stayed because at least they could finally be honest with each other, and others, like Amy, never bothered because they wanted more. But what more could we members of the ILA offer except for a brief moment of joy before the inevitable bullet in the heart or the back of the head? Siegfried and Gary rescued Devin from himself by bringing a rolled-up newspaper to our table. Gary grunted a hello, but my cousin barely seemed to notice we were there. Instead, he simply unfurled the paper and pointed at an article with almost manic triumph. "They're redirecting the butcher here," he said with a savage grin. "They're fucking terrified of us." A rush of anxious excitement coursed through my chest as I struggled to reconcile Griffin's horrific reputation with my own cousin's joy. If a single person embodied the full horrors of Heva's cruel empire, it was that irredeemable bastard, Bernadette Griffin. Disappearances, kidnappings, torture, and bloody children screaming for their parents as she handed them over to the cross-knit church were some of her lesser crimes. She was the absolute worst, and the Hevians were sending her here to find and kill us. Not the IFM, her original target, but us. We were more terrifying than any of Heva's other threats. Were we wrong to feel proud?
How is this a good thing?
Devin snapped.
They're finally taking us seriously, Siegfried explained. As seriously as the IFM.
But Siegfried, Devin pressed, and I lowered my ears at his tone. You know her reputation. She won't step 1 foot on Bearcastle soil, Siegfried vowed. Sandy is already gathering materials for the warm welcome I have planned for the bastard. This time, not even Heron can condemn us. Others have tried to kill her and failed, Devin said, looking to me for support I could not give him. Siegfried was right. The Hevians were sending their best soldier into our hands. We would never be gifted another opportunity like this again.
We were expecting this to happen, Gary added, seemingly annoyed at Devin's reaction. Or do you agree with Heron?
Not everything is binary, Gary, Devin snapped, and I placed a hand on his shoulder. Of course we trust Siegfried's plan, I attempted to mediate. But Devin is also right to fear the butcher. We shouldn't downplay her horrendous past. Siegfried gestured for Gary to hold his tongue and said, I'm not, but her brutality will play in our favor. Griffin's been in the Altahun for years and is used to fighting in a far-off colony no one gives a shit about. She'll bring the horrors of war and colonization to Heva's front door, unable to understand how that aids our cause. Most Hevians don't even know about that poor kid in the desert she tried to hang, but start hanging kids here, in Bearcastle, and even the most ignorant of Hevians will have to acknowledge the righteousness of our cause. Oh, how naive we were. As if Heva had a conscience that could be shamed of a child's death. A minor commotion came from the front door, and Asia's voice cried, Stop, Seer! I blinked, and Ernest grabbed Siegfried by his shirt and punched him into our table, knocking it to the ground. Glass shattered. People screamed.
Ah!
Hey, watch it!
What the fuck is wrong with you? Gary shouted, jumping between the pair while Devin and I pulled Ernest back.
McGill showed up momentarily to tell us off, but scurried away when he realized my cousin was involved, leaving poor Amy to clean up the mess. Devin abandoned me and Ernest to help her. Ernest, you need to calm down, I said, struggling to hold Zier on my own.
What the fuck is going on? Said Devin from the floor.
Police is dead, said Asia. His family received the news a few hours ago.
So? He's just a Hevian.
Gary scoffed, and I had to jump onto Ernest's back and nearly knocked Zier over to save Gary from another black eye. Please, Ernest. Ugh, you're making a scene, I grunted, wrapping around Zier like an octopus.
He was my friend, Ernest choked.
Enough, said Siegfried, pushing Gary out of the way and gesturing that I should release Ernest. I hesitantly slid off Zier back, and my cousin said, I'm sorry.
No, fuck you, snapped Ernest. I told you. I told you not to do it. I told you the casualties would be unacceptable.
One dead Hevian is hardly unacceptable, Gary scoffed.
Shut the fuck up before I shut it for you, Asia warned him while placing a hand on Gary's chest. Ernest, my love, we can't do this here.
It's not safe, Ernest, Devin added as Amy scurried away.
Safe? That's the point, Dev. He doesn't care about safe. Why? Why kill someone who wanted to help us?
Ernest persisted despite Asia shushing Zier.
He was my friend, but you don't care. You don't give a shit about anyone in this room. You'd sacrifice all of us if you had to.
Yes, I would. I'm dedicated to my country and to my people, said Siegfried. I won't rest until they're free.
God damn you for that. For making it sound noble.
Ernest spat at my cousin's feet. A protective anger bubbled in my chest, and I stood between Ernest and my cousin. Who are you to question Siegfried?
What Kings means, Devin cut in, throwing me an annoyed look, is that...
It's fine, Dev, said Ernest, taking a step back.
I'm done. I'm done with him. He's going to get us all killed, and I'm done.
Z marched out of the bar, Asia close behind. Devin motioned to follow, but Siegfried grabbed his arm and shook his head. Z needs time and space, Dev, and we need to plan how to welcome the butcher.
Fuck the butcher,
he snapped, escaping my cousin's grasp and running outside. I'll get him, I said, Siegfried calling after me to stay. I briefly looked up and down the street before randomly taking a right and running past warm and loving households trapped in cold stone buildings and empty sullen restaurants and cafes. I overheard Devin's voice and turned left, finding my 3 friends in front of a stone library. Ernest was leaning against the metal fence that ran around the building, while Asia and Devin encircled Zier. Asia swore when she saw me.
Go back to that murderer and tell him to go to the abyss, Ernest told me.
I'm not here for him, I said, meeting Devon's concerned glance. I'm here because I care.
He was my friend, Kingsley, said Ernest, wiping Zir's nostrils on the back of Zir's hand. He was like a father, and he wanted to help us. He was a good man.
We know, Ernest, but it was the Hevians who killed him, not us, said Devon, and Ernest scoffed.
You of all Itkatel don't believe that.
Asia placed her hands on Zir's shoulders and forced Zir to meet her gaze.
You need to go home and be with your family. Don't worry about the ILA for a few days. We'll be fine without you.
You can't trust Siegfried, Zir told her. None of you can. Ernest, Devon mumbled, his ears falling as he looked away. How can you say that? I asked. After everything he's done for our cause?
He doesn't care about any of us. We're pawns to him. Our lives are meaningless.
Because our cause is bigger than any of us, I argued, ignoring Asia's exasperated glare. You know that.
Ernest, you're upset, Devon interceded. You need to... He's going to get us all killed, said Ernest, pushing himself off the wall and staring us down. You have to see that, Dev. You know I'm right.
Now isn't the time for this, Asia said firmly, planting herself between us. Go back to Siegfried. I'm going to take Ernest home.
Please, don't trust him.
Asia's right, said Devon, stepping on my foot to keep me quiet. We'll talk later. We're so sorry about Cleese. He was a rare breed. Ernest slowly nodded, his ears drooping, and Asia pulled him down the street, Devon watching forlornly. Z's not wrong, is Z? Devon sighed. About Sid. I frowned. Of course Z's wrong. I'm sorry Cleese was caught in the blast, but what else were we supposed to do? Let the 7 dead go unavenged? If Z and Heron had it their way, we'd never make the Hevians pay for their crimes. Devon looked at me with a sad smile. Now you sound like Sid and Jerry. Now you're doubting him? I asked, my nostrils flaring. It's not about dying. I don't mind that at all. Not if it's for something. He gestured emphatically, and I was surprised to see a change at Itkatel. Instead of the clueless Itkatel everyone tolerated because he was good for a laugh, he was now an old Itkatel, twisted and knotted like a tree mistakenly planted somewhere dark and stifling.
Sandy didn't hate. You see, he's had years of practice, and he'll tell you. You can't survive repeated visits to the pen if you don't learn how to hate. And Gary, Devon shrugged. He's been through a lot, and he doesn't forgive easily, even though his Lord and Savior, Amalbaris, preaches otherwise. And you know, Sid, the only good Hevian is a dead Hevian. But Ernest is right. Is this who we want to be? How many did we kill?
They're only Hevians, I dismissed. Besides, they've never cared about our dead.
And we should be the same? Devon scoffed. No, I don't have enough hate for that. Do you?
It's not hatred, Dev. It's justice. Siegfried understands that, and so will Ernest.
God damn all Hevians for making Siegfried right. God damn them for making us do these things. I wish... It doesn't matter.
He patted my shoulder and headed towards the tavern, and I began to understand why we had yet to be free. The cause was too unforgiving, too cruel. Only our best, like my cousin, could ever master it. The rest of us to either die in its honor or be ground into broken husks of ourselves, clinging to our values but shamefully accepting we would never have the strength to see them into fruition on our own. We needed that person like Siegfried, who was unbreakable, to rescue us from our own cowardice. Poor Ernest and Devon. They tried so hard. Without my cousin, would they have ever found the strength to be heroes? July 13th, 1826. Mrs. Ryan's house, Berkassa Hiva. Heron swooped over the table like a terrible dragon about to eat its prey, eyeing us as we shuffled into the dark and dilapidated room. Only Asia and Ernest were absent. Siegfried stood opposite Heron, while the rest of us hesitantly stood behind the other chairs. Smoke seemingly billowed from Heron's nostrils as he assuredly thought about the most effective way to murder us. The silence dragged on as we fidgeted behind our chairs, and my cousin played with one of the tassels on his striped scarf. Finally, after a century of painful suspense, Heron flexed his hands before speaking evenly and succinctly in Itali, highlighting every consonant.
You had no right pulling off a stunt like that.
Siegfried opened his mouth to argue, but Heron violently cut him off.
No, you are not going to argue with me. Not after what you've done. I warned you, Heron, he snapped, unable to stop himself. I told you we were going to reclaim our freedom. We understand. You understand nothing, growled Heron, his voice controlled and low, but bristling with rage. You think a few well-placed explosives and a few dead police officers will be enough to break the Hevians? But you're wrong. You stupidly started a war without fully realizing the consequences, dooming us all. You've read the papers. We've taken the fight to the Hevians, and they're terrified. We did what we had to, what you were afraid to do. Listen to me, you foolish boy, hissed Heron. I've seen our people die because of arrogant idiots like you. I fought in the Shadow War, and I led a revolutionary campaign that brought Hiva to its knees. I know how this will end. We take full responsibility for the reprisals that are coming because we believe that not only will this galvanize our people to fight alongside us, but the Hevians have no stomach for a war fought in their own front yard. Who are you to force us into a war? Heron thundered, reverting back to the shatterproof rebel that wounded one of the world's most powerful empires. We don't replicate the methods of the IFM because they are viewed as crazed murderers who will destroy themselves. But now they're sending the fucking butcher to Hiva. You brought her violence and insanity here, and may God never forgive you for it. You're trapped in your own guilt and cowardice, Heron, and I'm afraid you no longer have the vision to ensure our freedom. I'm the one who kept this movement alive, and done nothing with it, shouted Siegfried. You hide and cower before the Hevians. You make us the laughingstock of the world, a group of delusional young Ikatel who are no closer to freedom than Amel is to returning. I kept our people alive. Yes, that's your philosophy. Better to live a slave than to face death, Siegfried said, his bitterness flying from his words. You would bring about civil war. Yes, I would, for the liberty of our people. I would wash the land of Hiva in a generation of blood, if it meant our children to enjoy the freedom you kept from us. I've given my life to this cause, said Heron, his voice cracking. I was there in '06 when Rory preached terror and vengeance. I was there when we were within inches of our freedom, but were sent to the slaughter instead. I've seen where your methods lead, and it isn't freedom. It's death and further subjugation. You're a cowardly old fool. I refuse to live through another Ikatel massacre. Then you shouldn't be leading us anymore.
The room shrunk as Heron's face and ears fell, and Siegfried took up what little space remained.
You would like that, wouldn't you? Heron spat. He didn't mean anything by it, attempted Devon. He got caught up in the moment. No, Devon, I meant it. It's time. You've lost your usefulness, Heron.
The old Ikatel wobbled back, his face trembling, and Devon stood ready to catch him if he faltered. Siegfried towered over everyone in the room, panting, as if he had just competed in the Triton Games.
A voice like sandpaper broke through the silence. We should put it to a vote. What? Snarled Siegfried. We should put it to a vote, barked Sandy. This isn't a dictatorship, it's a democracy, and we have as much a say in how we're going to prosecute this war as you and Heron do. Sandy, we can't, said Devon. Heron? No, they're both right, he said. It's been apparent for some time that my leadership is unsatisfactory. It's time I step down. Dev, give me your hat, said Sandy, rising from the stairs. One of you go get some paper and pens. We'll write down who we prefer. The Ikatel who has the most votes will be our new leader.
Gary passed out the sheets of paper and pencils. I didn't think long about it. Heron was broken, and Siegfried was determined to win us our freedom. It was as simple as that. I wrote down my cousin's name, folded the paper in half, and placed it in Devon's hat before returning to my dark corner. I didn't meet Heron's gaze as he stared at a burn mark. Some, like Gary, made their decision in a second while others took their time. Devon glanced at me before casting his vote. Sandy was last, and he threw his piece of paper into the hat with a heavy sigh that could be felt in the bowels of the planet.
Who's going to read the results? Asked Devon. I will, said Gary, rising and grabbing the hat.
He pulled out several pieces of paper.
Siegfried, Kingsley, Siegfried, and that's it, he said, throwing the last piece of paper on the table.
There has to be a mistake, I gasped.
No mistake, said Heron, double-checking the pieces of paper. Siegfried absent-mindedly pawed at his right ear as he processed the news before placing his hand on my shoulder and saying, Kingsley will be my second in command, and if anything happens to me, he'll take over.
I couldn't even force a thank you out of my dry mouth, so I nodded. Heron stared at the last vote, and the shadow of the ILA's bloody history flashed across his scaly and scarred face.
Heron, said Devon. He looked up with a start and swallowed. It's no longer my meeting to run. It's Siegfried's. Thank you, Siegfried said. You'll stay with the movement, won't you? Heron forlornly shook his head, like a patient finally ready to die. No, I don't think I can. I will always be available to you as a doctor, but I can't take part in this. I will leave you to your plans.
He gathered his belongings and cast one last look at us before climbing up the rickety stairs. A long silence followed, my cousin sorrowfully staring at his empty space. No one wanted Heron to leave. I wish he and Siegfried found a way to work together, but Heron was too stubborn to understand that his time as a rebel leader had passed. We needed someone the Hevians couldn't break.
Very well, Siegfried muttered before facing us and clearing his throat. I want to continue the momentum we've generated. The Hevians cannot know peace until we're free. The Butcher is on her way to Berkassa, and once she's through with us, she'll go after the IFM. It only makes sense to coordinate our efforts. Marcus is an Alanist nut, Gary scoffed. Gary, I understand the cross-knit faith is important to you, but Marcus is an effective leader. The Hevians subdued the Alcahun by pitting the people against each other. Will be impossible to defeat if we unite our forces. Have you already contacted him? Said Sandy, returning to his place on the stairs. I've been in sporadic communication with Marcus over the past couple of months, and he's interested in helping us. In fact, he wants to meet us in Berkassa as soon as possible, said Siegfried. I'm arranging everything for his trip, but we can't risk Marcus falling into the Butcher's hands, so we need to reorganize. He paused to look us over. Devin, you'll be our propagandist and chief recruiter. I trust everyone in this room, but we need more members, if we are able to defeat the Hevians. Enlist Asia's help if you need it. Sandy, you'll run intelligence and our weapons expert. Gary, you're our drill master. We need well-trained and disciplined soldiers if we hope to stand any chance against the Butcher's forces.
Isn't he arriving in a month? I asked.
Plenty of time, said Siegfried with his typical confident smile, and Devin exhaled in disbelief. If all goes to plan, the moment she steps onto Berkassan's soil will be her last.
You've just heard Prosecution introduced its list of war crimes committed by the Montivelo administration during the Second Shadow War, from Say I Slew Them Not by Kingsley Montivelo. Tonight's episode was read by Pepper Holloway and was sponsored by the mobile brain. Carry all the answers in your pocket. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Frederian Gazette and go to our website www.thefrederiangazette.com for episode extras. Join us next Wednesday at 5 p.m. for Episode 8, General Bernadette, the Butcher Griffin's tombstone, vandalized 3 days before 20th anniversary of her death.